Aditya Sarkar was saying, I haven't got a prepared speech. So I was thinking that I'll give an initial lecture, but I would like much more interaction with you. As far as I understand, most of you know the basics about microfinance and self-help groups. Is that right? Or should I just say in a brief? Okay. Let me start by saying that although Muhammad Yunus has got the Nobel Prize and Bangladesh is very much in the focus now, forming this small group and then making savings and giving credit is something which started in the early 70s in many countries. It was there in many traditional societies where a bunch of friends collect some money and then someone first takes a loan, then someone else takes a loan. This is not entirely new. Okay. Now, when it started in Bangladesh in the mid-70s, in many countries of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, also there were things like this. In fact, here the model was right from the beginning quite different. And the idea was that eventually we are going to form a group which will take most of the decisions themselves. Or the group can be directly linked to the bank, or an NGO can promote it. But at some point, the group will get a loan, and the group has to decide which member will get how much. And the group will also act like a profit center. By which I mean that in the case of Bangladesh Grameen Bank, I am the Grameen Bank. I give loans, there is an interest, and everything comes back to me. The loan and the interest. In the Indian model, in most places, if there is a group, here is the bank, I give you the loan at let's say 10% interest. The group sits together and gives its own members a loan at a higher interest rate decided by the group. So it can be 15%. Members return the loan to the group keeps back 5%, which has been decided by the members itself, and it returns the loan to the bank at 10%. So the group is acting like a business center also. Now this is quite important because in the Indian model, we are hoping that finally these groups will have a lot of autonomy. And in this whole SSG thing, there is this question of women's empowerment. So, in the Indian model, at least theoretically, there is more chance of empowerment of women, individually and as a group, and as a business group also. So this is something which is very important to remember. Now, it's not that there are only two models in the world. Now, because microfinance is now there in almost all countries. You know, it's also there in US and in the very developed countries. In the urban places, for very poor people, now they have this group and microfinance. Now, in India, there are three major players. Right now, the biggest player is still the bank. Bank supported by NABARD, which is the refinancing bank. The second biggest player is the Government of India. Government of India has a program called SGSY. This keeps on changing names, but it started somewhere in the 1999, and now it's being run by each state government all over the country. And as is usual with most government programs, it is in a mess, except probably Andhra Pradesh. And the third players are the NGOs. Now, obviously, mostly the NGOs have done very well in Andhra Pradesh, in Karnataka, in many states, but in some of the southern states, the NGO formed SSG groups and clusters and federations have become quite big and very successful. North India and Eastern India have been much slower. I will briefly tell you our experience, my experience. My organization, Swanikbhat, which is actually a very small NGO, we work in the district of North 24 Parganas, which is just. And he started writing a manual. So I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, Bangladesh Gramin Bank is very organized and we have to write down each and every step and group and what each person should be doing, what role they should have. So I was very curious, So for 1 month, he wrote a fat manual. And then he showed it to me and I found that the roles of each and every person was defined. So it was a 5-member group. So there is a president and there is a secretary and there is a treasurer of each of these 5-member groups. So there are 2 ordinary members. And then it keeps on rotating. So everyone's roles and responsibilities is written down. And then the employee of the NGO or Gramin Bank who would go, his roles and responsibilities, his supervisor's roles and responsibilities. Very great detail. So I was a little flabbergasted by all this. What I conceived as a budding bureaucracy. But then it turns out that any meeting of Bangladesh Gramin Bank, starts off with these 5 groups sitting there in a very specific order. So the president, secretary and the treasurer and the 2 members, and each group sits in a line like this. And each meeting starts almost like a military parade. They get up, they almost, like a rally or something, they raise their hands, they say some oath, which is wonderful words are there, they say this oath, and then they sit down in a particular order. So, this was totally mind-boggling. And we asked him, what are you doing? This is not a military or something. These are village women. And he explained to us that the whole success of Bangladesh Gramin Bank, this 99% repayment rate, it depends on very strict discipline. And this is how we are disciplining very poor women. I tried to argue with him, but he was adamant. He said, you haven't run a Gramin Bank, I have for 7 years. This is what has worked. This is how I know it works. So you cannot explain. So right in front of my eyes, I felt that a massive regimentation is started. All these women, they come marching in and they'll sit down in rows and they'll say every, like a political rally or something, they'll say the same thing. And whether they believe it or not, but according to him, this ritual was very important. And then within the employees also, there was a rule. He's written down the rule that who has to call whom sir, and if this guy gets up, what that guy is going to do. I completely lost interest in it. I think you do what you want. Anyway, so this was one thing which I didn't like at all. So this went on for a couple of years. He formed his groups and he trained up our people. And then fortunately, this person got a much better job offer and he left before we kicked him out. So then, so we have this very regimented groups. Our staff, 6 or 7 staff who were trained, they formed this 5-member groups. And then I started hearing about the dominant Indian one, where you have this at least 20-member groups, which are given much more autonomy. And then you wanted to switch over. He said, you're not going to follow the power of the government. You want to switch over. But that switch over was extremely painful. And you have to understand this, that you are taking very poor village women We're trying to teach them something new, both in terms of skill and habits. And they get used to something and then you want to change it. It's not very easy. So we broke up the groups. We made 15, 16, 17 member groups. We changed the system of how they conducted meetings. We changed the interest rate, the repayment rate, and so on and so forth. And we went through a very bad period for 2 years. For the women also, and for the workers of our organization, who were also trying to change things. So this is, you should understand that within Bangladesh, there has been for many years a very strong critique of Muhammad Yunus's way of working. And within Bangladesh, there are also many other different models of microfinance discussion, not just the Grameen model. In Bangladesh right now, there are 3 equally big microfinance institutions running. Grameen Bank is there are 2 others, which also have millions of customers. And every month, there are a large number of women who have now learned to manipulate the system. And they switch over, they take loans from Grameen Bank, they can't pay, so they go to the other NGO, become its member, take money from there and repay it to Grameen Bank. And they are doing this now. So, I went to a big international microfinance meeting in Dhaka 2 years back. And in many villages, you will see from the road signs of all the 3 banks, Grameen also and other 2. So now, within themselves, they are saying it's good to have healthy competition. So they are also competing about the interest rate and so on. So, I'm saying all this that, all over the world, SHG microfinance has become a big thing and it is going to remain quite big. But these are some of the issues which do not come up in the popular media. The other problem which I had with the Grameen model was, at that time, in 97, they had only one loan product, which means all women, millions of women, got a 1-year loan, which had to be repaid in 50 installments, weekly installments, starting from the first week you took the loan. Right? So you got a 3,000 rupees loan, it was divided up into equal installments with let's say 12 or 13% interest calculated in it. And every week I have to pay 50 rupees. So when I heard this, I was very confused. I was saying that, a poor woman can take loans and she takes the loan. Whatever she starts, that has to generate an income. Now if I buy a car, then it has to become big and then get big. If it's farming, then I have to have a harvest. If it's petty business, then of course I can have a weekly earning. But why do you have to have the same repayment rate for any kind of loan? Again, the answer was, this is what is working in Bangladesh. This is what I know. This is the easiest thing. This is what we are doing. I tried to argue with him. I said that, look, you might, I was trying to look at it this way, that through these rituals and the way they conduct the group meetings, and this whole idea of group is that if the loan is not repaid, then the whole group suffers. So the group, in essence, is creating pressure on every individual not to default, because then the whole group is suffering. So I was trying to think in this way, that you are bringing in an extreme regimentation, and you are creating systems where there is tremendous pressure to somehow repay the loan. And then you are very happy that 99% of the loans are being repaid on time. And I kept on asking this, are you sure that you are really benefiting this poor woman and her family? But anyway, so this was my issue, and because I didn't know any better, or I hadn't myself done it, I again allowed this person to set up this meeting. In 2000, Bangladesh Gramin Bank had gradually started changing. They started introducing more and more flexible loan products. So now, if you look at Gramin Bank loans, they have various kinds of loans: 6 months loan, 1 year loan, 2 year loan, 3 year loans, and various kinds of repayments. Now it is true that whoever all over the world is running these microfinance programs, the big problem is that, let's say our NGO, we have 600 groups and we are catering to more than 6,000 women, and we have 6 full-time employees doing this who are paid a very low salary. So, and these 6,000 women, they are doing sometimes a weekly, sometimes a fortnightly savings, and you are continuously giving them loans, and they are continuously repaying them. So there is a huge amount of work, huge amount of work. So, in a sense, for those workers, if I have only one loan product, they are very happy. Because then everything is straightforward. You give a loan, you know that you are going to get interest. If there are even 2 loan products, right now we have basically 2 products. One we call the agricultural loan, which we give for 6 months, and we expect 1 repayment after you harvest your crop. And the other is a 12-month loan. Now we've also started a 24-month loan. But there was a tremendous resistance from our workers to allow this flexibility. So these are some of the very sort of technical issues when you are doing this microfinance. Now, the other major issue is that this microfinance all over the world is now being publicized as the solution to debt. So the World Bank is very happy. Many countries are very happy. So this is another issue which we kept on debating initially, that is the issue just the supply of credit? So there are 4 women, 4 families who don't have access to credit. So you give them credit, and then they take loan and do some production activities, and then they are ready for more credit, you give them more credit, and everyone gets rich. Is that going to happen? So, right now in many parts of India, there are almost self-help groups now almost everywhere. And even within West Bengal, there are very prosperous districts which are triple cropping, where there is some economic activity going on throughout the year, agricultural business. But there are the dry belts, where it's single cropping, where in many areas there is not much of cash economy. And self-help groups have also been introduced there. Now, the way these self-help groups work is, initially they do a savings. Taking credit from us are now reaching their limits. Whatever activities they knew, whatever business they knew, they have taken credit. They have expanded a little bit as much as they could. But now they are reaching their limit, and now they are coming to us and telling us, can you teach us some new economic activity? And that is easier said than done. So this is one issue, is that if the primary purpose of microfinance is to increase the financial income of poor families, then in many parts of India there are problems. So whether economic activities will take place or not, always, in most cases, does not depend upon whether I am supplying credit to the poor. There are many other factors which have to come into play. And today, in many parts of India, economic opportunities are even decreasing. So we all have to remember that microfinance as a means to increasing the income of poor families has severe limits. But then what has happened in our district? What has happened is, because there are many economic activities, most of this was being run through money from money lenders, who traditionally charge anywhere from 50 to 150% per year. Money lenders charge interest rates per month, it's 10% a month. So it's 120% per year. We feel that through our microfinance program, where we are giving loans at 12%, 14% instead of 100%, we have essentially replaced the money lenders. So poor families who are taking interest either for agricultural activities or for their other income generating activities with very high interest rates, we are now able to supply credit at very reasonable rates. So in that sense, their income has grown. Some of them, their business has also expanded a little bit. So that we have done. But apart from that, as far as actual increasing the financial income, we are also stuck. We don't know what to do. So what else then? If you are talking about rural development, does rural development only depend upon increasing the income level of each family? If you could increase the income level of each family, does it automatically translate into total development? Do their education, health, environment automatically improve because you have increased their income? That is not true. There are many social problems in the villages. There are many problems with how the state government, the district government, the Gram Panchayat, they function. That is why in India, this idea of going for a model where this women's group would become more autonomous and get more empowered was so important, because right from the beginning, this whole self-help group thing was seen as not just increasing individual family income, although that was one major objective. The other objectives were that once these women become empowered, individually and as groups, then they could do a lot about all other development issues also. And so, to a large extent, that has happened all over. Wherever self-help groups have become strong, there have been all kinds of interesting developments. There are some very spectacular examples of, in Andhra Pradesh, in Nellore district, there was a big movement against illegal alcohol selling. In many places where self-help groups have become strong, they have joined the literacy movement. in many places, in West Bengal also, there are many examples where they have been able to stop small local corruption. There are cases where if the contractor is building the road and they see that the road is not being built properly, where these self-help groups are very well organized, they have led small local movements in order to stop these small corruptions. So it's not that a majority of self-help groups have taken part in this, but I would say at least 10 to 15% cases, the self-help groups have done these kinds of things. They have tackled many problems within their groups. So there have been cases of mutual help, non-financial mutual help within the group. There have been plenty of cases where they have taken up issues even outside their groups. Typically what has happened in many parts of India, when initially you try to form the group, there are many cases of husband beating of wives. शादी मीटिंग में जाती है, there's a typical example. There are many cases. In our case also we know plenty of cases where the women have been beaten up, where they hide and go to these meetings, where they hide this money to give as savings. And there have been very interesting cases of total turnaround where his wife beating husband now reaches his wife to the meeting in his title. And that. There have been cases where husbands have started cooking food at home which they never did before because the wife has to go to a meeting. So that kind of social change has taken place. Again, I wouldn't say that it has happened in majority of cases, but at least in 10-15% cases all over India, this social change is also taking place. The fact that the family gets the loan through the woman is itself empowering to the woman. So, in most cases it is women self-help group. Remember that there are men self-help groups also, there are mixed self-help groups also, but predominantly all over the world, it is the women self-help group. Because this whole thing was seen as an avenue of empowering women. So, even if the credit that is taken is used by the family, I mean in many cases the woman is actually not doing the income generation activity, it's the husband who is doing it. But the money has to come through the wife. So that itself has been quite empowering in many cases. So as I was saying that there have been many cases in West Bengal where let's say the ICDS center in the village is not running very well or the food is getting stolen. Especially in very poor areas where actually the self-help group is not involved in too much of economic activities. They have got involved in activities like that, where they have stopped the corruption in the ICDS sector, where they have stopped the corruption in Panchayat, where they have mobilized to get a drinking water source where none existed. Or there have been certain government programs where the government set up a drinking water tube well which the community mobilizes 20% fund and the government will give 80%. Men have failed, but where there is an organized self-help group, they have collected the money, they have got the land. So these kinds of things have happened. Now, unfortunately, after even many years, these kinds of social development efforts are not multiplying at the rate as it should. Because in many cases, the financial part is becoming too important. Especially in many NGO-run self-help group programs. Because the NGOs are seeing the self-help group program as a means to their own financial sustenance. You see, so far, rural development organizations or other NGOs like us always depend upon grants. For every year, we have to look for grants. And we spend it for whatever activities we are doing. And so perpetually we are looking for grants and perpetual insecurity is there as to what is going to happen next year. Now for the first time, self-help group is a program where banks give me loan at 10%, I give it to the self-help group at 15%, so I can leave the 5% myself. Many NGOs in India now who have done very well with self-help groups, at least the workers who are running the self-help group, their salary is now self-sustained. So every Tom, Dick and Harry all over the country is doing self-help groups. So many of you, I hear you go for rural placement, and you will find very few NGOs which do not do self-help groups. But in order to become financially self-sustainable, and now many banks are coming in, right? In South India, initially most NGOs were getting funds from some funding agency, either as one-time capital fund, which they could give to the self-help groups, or on a continuous basis. In South India, some of the banks started and said, we'll give you money to the NGOs. This is apart from banks directly running self-help groups. Banks started giving loans to self-help groups, to the NGOs. And now this has become the trend all over India. And ICICI Bank has become a big player. They have opened up a special wing to give just money to NGOs to give to self-help groups. They started in some southern states, now they have gone big time in Eastern India. But in order to do this, these banks will go and check how the NGOs have performed so far. And what they check specifically is, what is your on-time repayment rate? Which means that if you are giving so much loans to each and every self-help group, and they are supposed to return so much money on this day, how much of the money is being returned on time? This is very strict. So it does not matter if the group is eventually returning the loan or returning the loan within the total. If they have taken a 1-year loan and they have returned all the loan within 1 year, that doesn't count. Each and every installment is looked at. So if within 1 month they are supposed to repay so much amount, when they have repaid it or not. That is the kind of detailed accounts they look in. And there are all kinds of financial ratios they calculate based on that. And those have to be fantastic. Then only the banks will give you money. And there is something called SIDBI, which is a national bank. SIDBI is also giving a lot of money to NGOs. What I'm trying to say is, this for many NGOs, including my NGO, has become an obsession. So the workers who are controlling these SHGs, controlling the financial part of these SHGs, they have become very possessive about these SHGs. So suppose I go and say that, look, these women are the only set of people in the village who are organized, who have at least one meeting in a month, sometimes one meeting in 2 weeks, sometimes a weekly meeting. And therefore, they can do a lot of things. So what if I give them some health inputs, which they, not only for their own improvement, but to do some health program in the village. The biggest objection comes from the workers who are actually controlling the stores, because they see any other input as a distraction to the main task of taking money and returning. So what is happening, unfortunately, in many parts of India also, that this whole microfinance is looked as a business. It is a loan returning machine. And you know, the loan repayment rate of banks in India for the urban industrial sector and for the commercial sector is quite bad. And if you talk to these bank people, as far as microfinance is concerned, they have told us directly, we expect 98% repayment rate. 98%. And they tell us that if you don't have 98% repayment rate, you shouldn't pay interest. So this is a danger, that all the other potential of the self-help group in bringing around various kinds of change is getting scuttled by this very. So the government of India 2 years back gave an order to all the, in every district there is something called the DRDC. It's called District Rural Development Corporation. This is part of the Rural Development Ministry. They control the SGSY program, but they have been asked to start making a database of all SHGs. It doesn't matter who made it, the government, which department, banks, NGOs, whatever. But they are not doing it. And the idea was that in the SGSY program, they have provisions like making a production center per block, where any SHG who is doing a combined economic activities or buying their raw materials together or for marketing, they want to create some common facilities and they want all SHGs to access them, not just the government facilities. So they have been attempts, but again, as usual, Delhi gives orders, it goes to Calcutta, and then Calcutta forgets it, or it goes to districts, and then there are no competent people to do it and so on. Yes.
So you said, that your main concern when you were new to this activity was that creating income doesn't mean increasing the income of the family does not mean total development. I mean, my issue is the same. How do you differentiate between empowerment and creating a financial opportunity? How do you differentiate? I mean, I can also say that in the sense, because you said that NGOs are more successful than the others in case of India. That is probably because they also deal in the sectors like adult education and some security and stuff like that. So, how do you differentiate basically between this activity of microfinance? How do you differentiate between empowerment and an opportunity? How do you understand the both differently?
No, the other part was, NGOs have been more successful as far as creating very good self-help groups because they have given in more time and effort. As I told you, to create a very good group, you have to put in a lot of human hours. There has to be persons who are trained, who are going and sitting with the groups over a long period, 2 to 3 years. When banks are creating groups, they have no one doing it. And when the government is doing it, on paper the government has a structure. They have district officials, they have block officials, but they are highly insufficient. In any government program, not just SHG, whether you call teachers training or agricultural training, sometimes something called training of trainers is excellent at the state level. You have excellent trainers. Then it keeps on getting watered down. In the district you do something, in the block you do something. Finally the guy who is doing the grassroots level training, you find only 10% of the training has been done. And there again, the whole use, how ICT can be used to reduce this what I should say, the filtering away of all this capacity building thing, quality. That ICT can potentially play a very big role. Now the other thing that you are telling, see, when you are increasing the income level of a family in many parts of India, it actually does not lead to any empowerment of the woman. The problem is very severe in certain states. Family might have very good income, but the woman's status can sometimes become worse. So that is why you have to, microfinance is an opportunity for doing women's empowerment. In some cases it will happen, sort of more or less automatically. But in many cases you have to put in special efforts and extra efforts to see that.
So you need to say that it depends upon the commitment of the one who is working. Not necessarily a strategy. You mean to say that if anybody gets into this work, this activity, he, no matter how passionate he is, it's not necessary that he guarantees this. He understands what empowerment here is. Because he may just be giving opportunity and thinking it is unfound. When I'm dealing with such an issue, I'm asking whether, how do you differentiate between...
What do you mean by opportunity? In more credit, timely credit. I mean, a microfinance institution mainly is giving you certain financial services. Or that is the minimum, I should say. But I was telling you again and again, the problem is that in many cases that is the only thing that they are sort of getting trapped in to provide those financial services. Saving, credit, different kind of credit, and now they're also getting into insurance.
If we have time.
Yes.
I'm from New York City, and New York City's subway system has a very interesting history. Actually, in the 1910s, the downtown area of New York City was where all the factories, all the workers were. And it was a site, actually, Marx was in New York City at that time. It was a site of tremendous labor unrest. There were women, factory workers were striking in the streets. So they built the subway system in order to turn these workers who were turning into revolutionaries into homeowners. They gave them mortgages, home loans, and moved them out into the various boroughs. And the idea of the reformers was that by giving them these loans, they would incorporate them into the system and turn them from revolutionaries into people who have a stake in the system, and it worked. So I was wondering about the ideological implications of microfinance. Does it turn people who are potentially opposed to the system and asking for change from the system into people who then have a stake in the system and then are no longer interested in challenging the system in that way?
That is true, but then, that is one of the major arguments which was used by CPM political party against NGOs in general. That all these NGOs in India is actually a capitalist conspiracy. By funding money into this micro-level world, they are satisfying people in small pockets who then will never organize themselves to go for a macro-Bolshevik revolution. But that's, to some extent, that is true. What we see, that if you make the groups very well, and that has been our experience, if you give time and effort to nurture these groups very well, they become fairly independent. They are able to raise their voice. In many cases, they have mobilized against the local government and got things done and changed things. Unfortunately, I think in some states, the political parties are also looking with greedy eyes at these self-groups. They want to grab them and make them their grassroots level workers in order to mobilize votes for the elections. So this kind of game is going on in many places in West Bengal also. So West Bengal has just recently appointed a separate minister for SHG. And it has been very difficult for us to talk to that minister anytime. So
you talked of hand-holding for the first 2 or 3 years. So I think maybe that might be the most critical part of forming a structure at the grassroots level. So can you give us a quick summary of how you go in, just jump in and say that you give it to the...
See, I'll tell you briefly what happened is, in all states, including in West Bengal, the largest number of groups are now the Government of India's groups. So can you help us? And this particular care with which my organization also works, they said, okay, you give us a 2-year contract, and our partner NGOs in every district will try to build up a government system of nurturing these SHGs, of doing this handholding. Not just handholding, but even creating some kind of monitoring system, evaluation systems, and information flow system, etc. Now, we were a little excited because we had never done such large-scale work. And our point was that the same thing, because our experience is that if you could build good groups, then they can bring a lot of changes and they can become autonomous organizations. which may not listen to anyone's wishes and do good things. So we went about creating these modules of how you do this hand-holding. So you build up courses where you have one-shot trainings, but you have little things, and you produce these teaching materials and games and audio visuals. We did all this. It has been a disaster. I mean, we were supposed to strengthen government officials who will then do this. It didn't work. I mean, half the government officials are not interested, other half keep on getting transferred from one place to the other. And then we had made particular suggestions as to what kind of people to place, whom to involve, what kind of incentives to give. So all our suggestions were turned down by the government, and it hasn't worked. So by essentially hand-holding means that instead of giving a one-shot classroom kind of training, you do on-the-job training for a long period. And then you use various means to do it. So you develop a course module and their materials. And if women are illiterate, then you have to develop special kind of packages for them and so on. There's one hand up there.
So how democratic are these self-help groups? For example, the
If you go to Gramin, they're not. They're very regimented. That's their thing.
no matter what we say about the government, in the end of the day, it is a democratic institution. So these self-help groups, they
What
are
is the democratic institution?
in principle, self-help groups even in principle. That's what I'm asking you. In principle, the way they function, are they democratic?
I mean, it depends upon how you define them. I mean, there are elections among them, their leadership changes and so on and so forth. But see, the core point is that how to be democratic in a day-to-day affairs. I mean, how, because there are going to be conflicts among them. They will not all get close together. So, they have to reach consensus. So this, when you are, unlike the Gramin model, the way we do is, that decision has to be taken by the group. So when I am saying nurturing also, you actually have conflict resolution exercises and so on. So how to reach a consensus. And a lot of give and take among them. And if you have done well, then I would say there is a lot of democratic capital which is generated. And in many parts of West Bengal, those are the groups which have become quite active in the panchayat system also. In a sense, the panchayats are very weak institutions right now, all over India, very weak institutions. And we see good self-help groups. Were being formed. I didn't know about them, but what we call NGOs now are a search for alternatives to what the general development trend at that time was. In 70s this process had started. I was part of it, although I didn't know that a whole process was started. But in India, you know, the emergency was declared in 1975. That also turned a lot of people to look for alternatives. By late 70s, there was a whole bunch of people. There were the ex-Naxalites, there were people from the Jai Prakash movement in Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, there were the radical Christians who got their inspiration from Latin America, in South India, there were the old-time Gandhiites, there were new Gandhiites. So by 80s, there were many people all over India who were trying to search for alternatives, and I am part of it. So I finished my college and I went to teach in a school in Arunachal Pradesh, in a tribal school, hoping that many of the things that I am now doing in rural development, in education, health, agriculture, that I would actually do it through changed high school curriculum. My original idea was that what we have studied from class 5 to class 10, which is not relevant for most of India, and there should be a different curriculum where children should be studying their own environment, about its problem and possibilities. And most children would anyway stay in their own local area, and that they would do something about it. Either. So that was the idea. I went to Arunachal Pradesh for a year, it didn't work. Then I went off to Queensland. 86, I have come back and I am in rural development.
Sir, how is educational qualifications help you in working for rural development?
It hasn't directly, but then in many places when I am trying to talk to people or to the government, I have a card which says Princeton University.
In government offices. So there is same thing going on NGO also nowadays. There are NGOs which are not working properly, they are making money. So and now it's not coming under RTI also, the RTI Act which came in 2003. So how do you think we can find out that which NGO we should join, which NGO we should not join, or the relevant information?
Within the NGO sector, for many years there has been a debate on creating self-regulating structures. Or, the chartered accountants have this thing, the doctors have this thing, so whether the NGOs could also have a body like that. There have been sporadic attempts, but so far it hasn't worked. Now people are again scared that if we don't do it, then the government is going to do something, form a body. So I don't know, there has been a lot of talk, but nothing very concrete so far. I have got sometimes few forms saying that fill this question, and it will ask questions like, have you done audit, is this available, who's your board, blah, blah, blah. But when you are trying to work with a particular funding agency, like when you started working with CARE, they did a massive 7-day evaluation where you talk at different levels, and then they rate your organization. So some kind of rating system has to start. But as you know, in Bihar there was a joke that nowadays a politician, when he gets his daughter married off, he presents his son-in-law with an NGO.
Before you join other NGOs, you may check out our NGO. I have a copy of the annual report.
But we are very small. So.
Anyone who wants to take responsibility returning it to me can have this. Okay? Got to come back. That's my copy of the annual report.
So has to speak on rural development also. So, and running out.
8 o'clock.
Yeah. You can ask questions after.
No, I think it's too late to talk about a completely different issue now. If there are more questions on microphones, we can go ahead. What do you think, sir? Because if I start another topic, it's
how about telling him how can you use ICT, which is part of your professional training? Can you help us out with it?
Can I give you a few examples of what I see as ICT? You people have heard about IIIT in Hyderabad?
Yes.
They have a thing called e-Sagu. Sagu in Telugu I think means agriculture, right? The e-Sagu thing is that in IIIT they have a bunch of 8 agricultural experts sitting there. And they have started working in certain villages. And for a bunch of 10-12 villages, they have a computer and 2 people sitting there. Computer with email connection. With each of these computers, they have 10 or 12 village level workers, each with a camera. Now, each of these people, they can handle 100 farmers or 150 farmers. So every week, he goes to every farm. So in the beginning of the season, you ask farmers to register. If you register, this guy is going to take a picture of your field and fill up a very simple questionnaire. for different stages of agriculture. And through email it goes to IIIT. And the picture goes via CD because the computer connectivity still cannot handle pictures. Okay? Now at IIIT there is 8 experts. So if the sowing season has started, he has to give certain recommendations about the soil. He sends it via email. And once the crop is there, and if there are problems, then the picture comes and they look at it and they give their recommendations to you. And this is just 3 years old now, I think, or 3 years. So first 2 years they did it free, now they have started charging farmers per acre, depending on what crop. They started with tobacco, now they have picked up rice or that. I think that this is excellent what they are doing. So this is one example.
One more thing, I think ITC has started that they install a computer in every village and farmers can access market information for their products.
That has been there for a long time, but see, that is one thing. Well-off farmers who have a lot of surplus will benefit from it. That's also needed. But you know, farmers face tremendous lot of problems in actual farming before the harvest is there. Pest attack is there, soil problems are there, diseases are there, and there's no one to tell the farmer. Or if it is, it's like, you know, all over India, the person the farmer approaches most when they are in problem is the pesticide shopkeeper. So he's the guy who's most close. If you have a problem, and he will say, okay, use this, use that. So, so here I think is an excellent use of ICT. And they are also, they have also made the system simpler, the form simpler, and I saw it and I think it's working well. I'll give you another example. Let's say all over India at different levels there's a lot of data with the government, because apart from the census where you are collecting a huge amount of information, all the time some surveys are going on by some department or other, and there are national sample surveys. In West Bengal, a commercial firm, which is a GIS company, for the 2001 census, they just picked up 2 data. One was female literacy less than 30%, and the other was, you know, there is a criteria in census called the main workers, that is people who have more than 170 days of work in a year. Marginal workers, less than 170, non-workers who have less than 8 years. The numbers might be a little off, but that's the whole idea. And they picked up marginal and non-workers more than 60%. Now in census you have data of every village. So they said, okay, let's just plug these 2 data in and see what comes out. And 4,000 villages of West Bengal showed up. And the newspaper picked it up and made a big hue and cry that these 4,000 are the most deprived villages in West Bengal, where female literacy is less than 30% and marginal and non-workers are more than 70%. So that so many people don't have work. And the Chief Minister was quite rapid. And he gave a specific order to all the district magistrates to start visiting these particular villages. And horror stories started pouring in. And the officers went and found that most people didn't have ration cards, no government officials had visited those villages for 30 years, houses were in bad shape, many people were malnourished and so on and so forth. But there are many more kind of data which needs to be very simply analyzed. Again, it looks very simple, but this is again, technically it's not very difficult, but people have to start handling data in order to make this data of some use, because in most cases all this data is lying there. And further, if we believe that at some point Gram Panchayat, the lowest level government, has to actually do planning and implementation of their own plan, which to some extent has happened in Kerala, out of all states, then there also you need micro level data also to be analyzed. Right now, if you go all over India, most panchayats don't even have a map of it. There is a lot of data of that panchayat, but no one has given it to the panchayat. And even if you give it, they won't know what to do. So this is again a place where all kinds of ICT can be used. And third, which is one of my favorite topics, is that in school education, generally in India, apart from some elite schools, I think audiovisual medium has not been used at all. Today, all over India, a large number of first generation learners are coming to school. When we were in school, almost all of us are from literate middle class families. Maybe not middle class, but literate families. Teaching us was a completely different ballgame. Now, millions of children are there where they're not going to get any support from families, where their retention capacity to understand concepts which are, to us, even when we were kids, if you talk about the world, Greece, history, it makes sense. But to a child from an illiterate family who has very little exposure, all those things don't make any sense. Can audiovisual medium be used properly to enhance their learning and teaching? I'll give you the example of one subject in the case of West Bengal. All over India, in the government school system, at the primary level,